Hello everyone, welcome to my Evil Within, Akumu difficulty, no upgrade / keys walkthrough, and this is Chapter 5, Inner Recesses. And this is definitely the point in the game where the game starts to get a little bit more difficult. And we're currently going to be dealing with a bunch of invisible haunted. Oh, that right there, that's pretty hilarious. You can actually punch that hallucination for some reason. Heck, you might even be able to get green gel from that hallucination if you successfully kill it. I mean, I've never done it because I never go for upgrades on this game because it's completely pointless. But that'd be pretty cool if you could. I know there are a couple of moments on this game where you can get free green gel if you do something very specific. Like, for instance, with Chapter 11, with that one haunted running away and then the building collapses on him. If you shoot him before the building collapses on him, you get 1,000 green gel. Like, there's a lot of moments to do stuff like that just to get some free upgrades.
Looks like I
but
have to get down.
It's not beneficial to me, so there's no point in really doing it. But that one invisible haunted that I used the flashbolt on, you have to wait a couple of seconds before actually firing your flashbolt, because for some reason, when he disappears, he's not in the map for a couple of seconds. And if you fire your flashbolt, nothing happens, and you end up wasting a flashbolt, which is really annoying. And then, this guy, the invisible haunted, mainly like to grab you. So, I'm using that against this guy over here, because I know that he's going to be way faster than me if I decide to not sprint. And then the moment he decides to reveal himself by trying to attack, I just punch him. I watch what he does. If he doesn't immediately go into the counterattack, I just punch him one more time when he faces me. And then I just run away from his counterattack and then hit him in the face with a bottle. And then just do the sneak kill on him. And that's something you gotta bear in mind when you're trying to melee the Haunted on this game. The Haunted have several counter animations that they do if you repeatedly punch them. And when you do punch a Haunted, it does make them flinch, so long as they aren't in any kind of grab animation. When they are in some kind of grab animation, they get hyper armor, and they can just completely ignore the flinch animation that the punch is supposed to provide you. So that's why I recommend baiting out the Invisible Haunted's grab attack before punching him, so that he's not going to screw you over with an attack that's going to give him hyper armor. But we now have the hospital keycard, and there's going to be one final Invisible Haunted, but you can just completely ignore him. Like, the door opens, but you can just run through the door, and he gets stuck back in this room. So he's going to be bashing down the door, but he has no time to get to you. And all you gotta do is just use the hospital keycard on this door over here, and the door will lock behind you, and you just gotta proceed onwards. Simple. And that'll be, the last time we'll be fighting Invisible Haunted up until Chapter 14. Because in Chapter 14, on Akumu difficulty, certain enemies get replaced by the Invisible Haunted. And it doesn't really make that much of a difference because the Invisible Haunted on Chapter 14 are in a passive state. So as long as you know where they are, you can just burn them with a match and they will be done for, and there's nothing they can do about it. And speaking of the matches, I need to actually talk about something related to the matches on this game. So obviously, fire is a big weakness for every single enemy type in this game because of course Ruvik is the core of the system, and Ruvik is afraid of fire. But don't let that go to your head too much, because if you try to burn Haunted with the match, there is a random possibility that they will get up off the ground and they will try to attack you. And it comes out of nowhere. That is Shinji Mikami design right there, where he tries to give the players a false sense of grandeur, and then they just get punished for believing in that false sense of grandeur. So you have to bear that in mind when it comes to burning enemies on the ground. They will sometimes get up off the ground and try to grab you as a suicide attack. And of course, if you get grabbed on the Akumu difficulty, you're dead. Unless your AI partner saves you for very specific chapters. Because on Chapter 5, we're going to be with an AI partner, and the AI on this game is not very good. The fact that they have a health bar is just so questionable because they are so incompetent at what they do. They can barely kill enemies. The damage that they do to enemies is so little, and they have a chance of missing, and they just run around all over the place, just trying to get away from the enemies, but the enemies are so much faster than they are, so they keep running around all over the place, and they barely support you, and based on all those reasons, the AI is incredibly unreliable, and all of this could be fixed if the AI didn't have any kind of health system. And we're being introduced to Joseph right now, and this is our AI partner for Chapters 5 and 6. So, thankfully, on this game, compared to Resident Evil 4, healing on this game does not consume healing items. So you can pretty much hold X on Joseph and he'll get healed. That's definitely the one saving grace with this AI system that's very incompetent. And they can actually save you from grabs, which was the point I was going to get to when I was discussing how to escape from grabs on Akumu difficulty for chapters 5 and 6. So, when you get grabbed by an enemy, you don't get killed immediately unless they have a weapon. If they have a weapon and they grab you, you are always going to die. The AI will never get you in time. If the enemies don't have any weapons and they grab you, the time it takes for them to kill you during the grab animation is a little bit longer, where they have to throw you onto the ground and then stomp your head. And when they do throw you onto the ground, it does do some damage, but it's not damage that kills you. The stomp is what kills you. So the AI has plenty of time to attack the enemy who is grabbing you, and if they successfully attack the enemy, the animation will be cancelled and you will be saved. And it's so rare for that to happen, but the fact that it can happen is really helpful, in case you get grabbed. So, if you're getting any moments where you're getting grabbed by an enemy that doesn't have a weapon, and your AI partner is in a favorable position where they will most likely be able to attack the enemy, maybe wait a little bit longer before restarting the checkpoint, so that your AI partner will likely save you. On Chapter 6, it doesn't really happen that much, because Joseph has an axe instead of a gun, and he has to actually run towards the enemy to melee them with the axe, and oftentimes Joseph doesn't really go for the attack, because he's very passive, and he does all these different animations, such as taking cover for no reason. But this is the big fight right here. This is a fight that gives a lot of people trouble, and this is where the AI is going to really screw you the most, because they are so incompetent. There's no real strategy for this sequence, but after you kill more than 2 enemies, these enemies will spawn. I'm going to use a shotgun on them, and I'm going to burn them with a match. The guy who has the axe is the one who will prioritize you, so you've got to make sure he doesn't get you too quickly. And then after you kill those guys, these guys will spawn. I managed to get very lucky there, and they managed to group up, so I was able to kill them with the axe. I'm going to use another match over here. You get a lot of axes on the first phase, and it's definitely necessary because the first phase is very difficult. The first phase is the hardest part of this fight because it's so hard to tell which enemies are going for you, which enemies are going for Joseph, and it turns into quite the mess. But once the dynamite guy appears, the first phase is done. And all you gotta do is just shoot him in the leg once, and he will fall over, and you just gotta wait him out. And that's the end of the first phase. Oh no, never mind. Somehow that guy managed to survive the dynamite. I don't know how that's possible, because dynamite is supposed to instantly kill enemies all the time, and he was within the blast radius of that. So, that is the first time I've ever seen that. I've never seen a dynamite guy survive his own dynamite like that. But it doesn't matter, and the checkpoint has triggered. Now, the second and third phases are very easy. In fact, on the second phase, every single enemy goes for you. None of the enemies will go for Joseph, and I'm going to use this to my advantage. So my strategy for the second phase is I sit in this area here, and I just let Joseph take shots at the enemies. And eventually they will die, and they mainly just set up in the back area where Joseph is, or directly above you, but that's not doing them any good whatsoever. I mean, eventually one of them is going to have the courage to actually come over to where I am and attack me, but I'm just going to deal with them using the axe, or using the pistol by just knocking them over. And this will absolutely trivialize the second phase of this whole entire fight. And I just wish that Joseph could actually kill these enemies very fast. If you're going to give Joseph a health bar, at least make it so that when he actually damages enemies, it matters. I mean, look at Sheva, for instance, from Resident Evil 5. A lot of people hate on Sheva, but that's only because they don't know how to use her. Sheva is absolutely amazing compared to Joseph. Sheva is so reliable, she kills enemies very quickly, and she participates in combo attacks, she saves me all the time. She's so good. And to make a better comparison, let's compare Joseph to Louis from Resident Evil 4. Louis from Resident Evil 4 was actually active when it came to killing the enemies. He had infinite health, he gave you ammo, and he just constantly supported you. How is it that Shinji Mikami can go from an AI system that was as incredible as Louis to a completely inferior version such as Joseph? It doesn't make any sense. If he clearly understood how to make a proper AI partner in a survival horror game, why did it not translate into this game?
Is that it?
It's so confusing. I mean, Joseph becomes a lot more reliable in Chapter 12 because he has infinite health, and he actually does a good job in getting rid of the enemies, and he helps during the boss fight against Heresy. But in Chapters 5 and 6, he's completely useless. But this is the third phase, and for the third phase, I just sit in this room, and I wait for the enemies to mantle, and then I attack. That right there, the axes are supposed to be a one-hit kill, but for some reason, these enemies have increased health, where they can survive an axe. So, the axe will not instantly kill them, but it will put them into the near-death status, so one hit will just finish them off. I mean, that's not going to be the case with the Fat Haunted, since, of course, the Fat Haunted have way more health. But I was able to use that dead body as a trap to get rid of one of the Fat Haunted, And thankfully, this guy is going after me and not Joseph, because normally one of the Fat Haunted is supposed to prioritize Joseph. So now that they're dead, 2 Dynamite guys will spawn depending on where you are. I'm on the bottom floor, so I know that the enemies are going to spawn from the bottom floor, so I'm going to run all the way up. And the Dynamite guys on this game, they cheat exactly the same way as they do in Resident Evil 4, where there is no consistency with how long it takes for the Dynamite to detonate. Like with this guy, for instance. This guy's Dynamite detonated right there. But there are times when he can go the full distance to where I am, and his Dynamite will not have blown up. And if that happens, you need to jump down. I don't know why this happens with the Dynamite guys in Resident Evil 4 and The Evil Within, but there's no reason they should be allowed to prolong their Dynamite way longer than it perhaps should. It just doesn't make any sense. It just gives them a cheap advantage when it comes to getting rid of you. I mean, I appreciate that in Resident Evil 4, you can shoot the Dynamite out of enemies' hands and just shoot them in the leg while they're running, and that the Dynamite doesn't have that wide of a blast radius, but on this game you're not afforded such advantages. You can't disarm enemies of their weapons by shooting their arms or their hands, and shooting them in the leg while they're running is very difficult because the random variable on your pistol makes it very hard to hit their legs, as you saw with that very first Dynamite guy that I dealt with in this encounter for the first phase. And the blast radius for the Dynamite on this game is very wide. It has a lot of range. You have to be quite the distance away so that the Dynamite doesn't hit you. So you can clearly tell that the Dynamite guys on this game are far more dangerous compared to the Dynamite guys from Resident Evil 4. Like, the Dynamite guys on Resident Evil 4 were actually very helpful for clearing out a bunch of hordes, and there were several sequences in Resident Evil 4 where you could use Dynamite guys to clear out a whole bunch of enemies. On this game, there just aren't that many sequences where Dynamite guys are going to be that helpful. So, for the most part, Dynamite guys aren't really going to help you that much. In fact, trying to allow a Dynamite guy to live longer than he perhaps should just to help you out is actually very dangerous, because these guys are very good at throwing the Dynamite perfectly so that it just seems to land near you. So, what I oftentimes do to avoid Dynamite guys is I try to run away from them, and then the moment I see them throw, I run back towards them so that I can just get past them. Because I think what they do is they throw the Dynamite in the path that you're going, not directly at you. It's a very clever system because you're not expecting it. A lot of games utilize this feature where the enemies intentionally try to use their attack in a spot where you're going to be just to hit you. It's so clever. And this game seems to have that mechanic for the Dynamite guys. This was not the case in Resident Evil 4. But that whole sequence, just do exactly what I did and you'll be fine. And all we gotta do now is just descend to where Kidman and Joseph are, and we've got to save them. So turn around and go into this crevice behind you. And do you see the torch over there? I must have missed this torch so many times on my earlier playthroughs of this game, and it took me such a long time to realize that there was a torch on the ground. And this torch actually makes a difference because it helps in clearing out one of the enemies that are attacking Kidman and Joseph. Those enemies that I just passed, they're not onto you immediately. They're in preset animation, so you can use that time to get past them. I gotta give credit to Shinji Mikami for forcing the players to assess the situation before attacking the enemies. And there are several sequences like this in The Evil Within where the enemies aren't onto you immediately. They're in preset animations, so you can either use the time to run past them or punish them accordingly. But we're about to make our way over to where Kidman and Joseph are, so grab those trap parts, make sure you have the torch with you. And also, by the way, at the end of this fight, make sure you have at least one match left. Because you need 5 matches for the boss fight against Laura if you want to replicate the strategy I'm going to do. And this guy right here, you can do a sneak kill on him. I saw a guy named K-Hunk do this, and I was so surprised when I saw it. So that gets rid of him, and I'm going to use the torch on the Fat Haunted because he's the most dangerous. And I'm just going to finish off this guy with the shotgun. There we go. And I have 3 matches left. That's good. And it's important you have at least 1 match left because there is a place where you can get 4 matches, and you'll be able to restock on 5 matches. But before I make my way over to where Laura is, I'm going to go to this optional area over here, and I'm going to loot a chest, and I'm going to get some freeze bolts. But before that point, there is a moment where there's going to be a spike trap and a guy lying on the ground. There's the pressure plate, spike trap's activated, and just make a run for this guy's back. This guy's in the preset animation. You have plenty of time to do a sneak kill on him. And he's dead. So cool. And go up here, and then the chest is over here. So during this brief hiatus, I'll talk about how the boss fight against Laura is going to work. So there's a reason why you need 5 matches for this boss fight, and that's to make sure that you're maximizing on damage against Laura. And there are a lot of dead bodies inside of the fight where Laura is, and she uses those dead bodies to teleport all over the place. And that's what the matches are for. The matches are going to be used to punish Laura whenever she tries to emerge from a body. And there will also be some torches inside of the fight that will allow you to do the exact same thing. And if you replicate my strategy exactly, Laura will never get a chance to attack back. There are only a few bosses on this game that allow you to completely stun-lock them, and they never ever get a chance to attack back, and Laura is one of them. The next boss that actually lets you stun-lock it to death is the Quell boss fight in Chapter 14, because the stun bolts and the Magnum really help in maximizing on damage and keeping the boss stunned. Oh, by the way, right here, I'm trying to use a flashbolt to get rid of these enemies, but that was very slow. It is entirely possible to kill 2 enemies in rapid succession using the unupgraded flashbolts, but you have to make sure the enemies are really close to each other. And how it works is, you sneak kill the first enemy, and then you have to make sure you get behind the second enemy before doing the sneak kill. If you try doing it from the front, it will not work. You have to do it from the back, because the enemies are in a recovery period where they cannot be sneak killed from the front, but they are still in the stealth profile, so you can just sneak kill them from the back. And that's what allows that to work. I use this trick several times during certain chapters, and it really helps in saving your ammo. But here is Laura. You have to backtrack a little bit to make sure that Laura triggers the correct scripting that allows the wire to electrocute the oil spill. And of course, by doing that, you come to realize that Laura is incredibly weak to fire. And also, you gotta be very careful here. The wire actually has a hitbox. You cannot touch it. So you have to make sure you're hugging the corner so that you don't accidentally hit the wire. And since this is Akumu difficulty, obviously you'll die. It's a nice little troll on the developer's part. Classic Shinji Mikami. Even though I don't remember any kind of environmental hazards like that in Resident Evil 4. But the boss fight is about to begin now, once we trigger this checkpoint. And you're gonna need to make your way over to the back of this area and pick up the torch here. And then what you're going to have to do is spawn in Laura. Laura always spawns in the middle of the room, and during the animation, she's completely vulnerable to a match. This is not going to be the exact same case when she's emerging out of the bodies. You have to wait a little bit after she emerges from the bodies. But right there, that was different. She was completely vulnerable during that whole entire animation, and that's what allowed me to do it very early. So, time your match hits, and follow exactly what I'm doing. Use these exact bodies in this exact order, and you'll be able to stun-lock Laura for this first part. After using a match on this body, you're going to need to use your torch. Make sure you're aiming. Laura is completely invulnerable while she's getting out of the body. You have to wait a second after she completes her animation so that she's vulnerable. And there you go, I timed it perfectly. Now you're going to have to climb up the ladder, and you're going to have to be very fast here. You need to pull the switch so that when she spawns out of that body, she's going to get hit by the incinerator. And there are times when Laura can glitch above the incinerator and she will not get hit, but that's very rare, so just follow exactly what I'm doing. If it doesn't work, just restart the checkpoint. And she's about to emerge from this body right now, but look at this. The time it's taking for her to get out of this body is even longer than usual. That's one of the ways that developers have tried to trick players into accidentally using their matches early. They've added a bit of unpredictability to Laura with the amount of time it takes for her to get out of the bodies. So it definitely adds a bit to the challenge of this fight. But now that I've used my last match, I'm going to have to use this torch right here. And she can choose to spawn from this body or the body to my right. You want to hope that she spawns from the body directly ahead of me. I think what I should have done is gotten closer to the body directly ahead of me, but unfortunately she spawns out of this body. It doesn't make that much of a difference, but I still recommend making sure that Laura is spawning out of the other body, so that you can put her into a position where she is forced to do a turning animation when you try to go for the switch. And during the time it takes her to do that turning animation, she's completely vulnerable, and she will never be able to get up to you very quickly. So now that that's done, we have one final sequence of Chapter 5 to do, and it's a sequence I don't really like because of the way it works. So, you have 3 Haunted that are connected to this machine, and the only way to kill them is to pull the plug on them. But the problem is, you don't get any iframes when you are pulling the plug out of their heads. So, if the enemies decide to do an attack that is not a grab animation, you're screwed. And that one factor alone makes this fight really annoying. But what I'm going to do to deal with these enemies very easily is I'm going to knock them all over with the shotgun. I'm going to use a flashbolt to make sure they stay on the ground for longer. And you will be able to get rid of 2 out of the 3 enemies, and then you can just finish off this final enemy. And that is the end of Chapter 5. Stay tuned for the future chapters. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.